Angel beings, it's Ivy. As you can see, it's nighttime. The lighting behind me is pretty sad, so I apologize about that. I'm just so juiced up and excited to share with you about my evening. Tonight I attended a gathering of doulas and CNMs, which stands for Certified Nurse Midwives, and registered nurses at Cedars-Sinai Hospital here in Los Angeles. And this is not an underestimation to say this was really a historic night, because to my knowledge, never before have all of us come together in one room with the shared intention of giving the best care possible to laboring women. And it was really moving to hear some of the doulas who have been practicing for decades talk about how much the climate is shifting towards a more collaborative, cooperative energy between doulas and nurses and midwives and doctors. And just in my own experience as a relatively new doula, I've only been practicing for the last 3 years or so, I have had this spectrum of experience from incredibly unsupportive nurses that said really intimidating, totally inappropriate things to my clients, to nurses that made the difference between night and day with their support and their comfort and their care and their experience. And I had the privilege to speak with the head nurse at the end, Marl Ann Shelton, incredible goddess woman. This woman just inspired me so deeply tonight. It was my first time meeting her. And I just shared with her an experience that I had at Cedars where a nurse said something to one of my clients that I feel was really inappropriate. She was commentating on the mother was running a fever, which is not uncommon in labor. And she made the comment, your baby is roasting. Now, needless to say, this just inspired more fear in my client, and it was the kind of thing that really pits doulas and nurses against each other, because nurses are responsible for the medical aspect, and doulas are responsible for the emotional aspect. And so I was just making the point to Marl how critical it is that this information is delivered, that the way the information is delivered is paramount. And she was so supportive and agreed with me and gave me her card and told me to personally inform her if this type of thing happens again. And I just felt so filled with hope for this field. And as someone who, after the first birth I attended, I came home and cried and cried and cried. I mean, I was just so overwhelmed with the challenges that I faced as a new doula in a rather conservative hospital. And I remember speaking to several people after that first birth and just saying, I can't do this. I'm not cut out for this. And it's people like Marl, it's so many others that I obviously don't have time to name in this brief video who have inspired me to keep going. And I don't even want to say fight the good fight, because the moral of the story tonight is it's not us against them, that everybody has good intentions at heart. I really do believe that, no matter where they're coming from ideologically, everybody has their own background and everybody has their own ideas of what needs to happen. And even this nurse that made what I considered to be a pretty horrific, horrifying comment, if I take a step back from it, I understand that her intention in using fear as a tactic was to motivate my client to take precautionary measures, to take antibiotics, which is what the nurse's agenda was at that time, which my client wasn't really particularly receptive to at the time. And so my way of going about it would be a different way, would be a more nurturing way of presenting the woman with options, giving her information in a soothing way, in an affirming way. But not everyone has that type of training, the same way I don't have the medical training that the nurse does. So it's really about respecting each other and honoring where we're all coming from. And that might sound really trite, and I know a lot of you guys watching this are not in the birth field. So this might seem totally left field, this video that I'm making, but I don't know how many of you know this. My initial intention in beginning this web series was to bring birth out into the open, to bring all the issues surrounding childbirth into the open, because it's the one thing that everybody on this planet has gone through. We've all been born, and so many of us will give birth, or if you're a guy, support your partner giving birth to your first child or second or whatever one you're on. And it's just these issues are so important, and they're not talked about very often. So that was actually what initially inspired me to make this series, was my experience as a doula and just wanting to get some of this information out there. And as this particular evening applies to life, it's really true across the board, just how we conceptualize us and them, how we conceptualize when there is a conflict. Are we able to step into the other side's perspective? And I'll give a brief example of this as it relates to communication tools in general. I was at a coffee shop the other day waiting for my latte that I get every once in a blue moon. It's my little treat. And this woman was not happy with her drink. And her way of communicating that was to complain and basically make a scene of, this is wrong, this is wrong, this is wrong, this is wrong. And I watched the person behind the counter, and I watched his face fall, because he seemed at a loss as to what to do about the situation. And it struck me that if she had just made a constructive statement, like, here's what I need, as opposed to here's all the things that are wrong, this man would have wanted to help her. And that might seem like a really trivial example. I was actually really moved in the moment, because I had so much compassion for the barista, the man making the drink, who clearly wanted to help this woman, but just, what can you do when someone's yelling in your face? And I also had compassion for the woman, because it was so clear that she was completely unequipped to communicate her needs. She just didn't have the tools. So my really simple message today is, if we do find ourselves in conflict with someone else, even on a global scale, to look at the similarities we have. What do we share in common? That was something that came across so strongly tonight with the nurses and the doulas. I watched one of these nurses speak about how when it's decision-making time, when we go from plan A, the way we want the birth to go, to now it's looking like we might have to move into plan B if medical interventions are necessary. A lot of times a tool we'll use as doulas is to ask the nurse to step out so that we can kind of powwow with our clients and check in with her and see how she's feeling about things, and just grant her time to process everything. And the nurse shared how she wants to be a part of that, and how she wants to be there for the client and support the client. And when she's asked to leave, how that landed with her. And that was so moving to me, because as a doula, it didn't even occur to me that that would be on a nurse's mind. I'm seeing the nurse as responsible for this entire floor of laboring women. And it just really drove home the point to me that we are more similar in our intentions than might be seen on the surface, based on our differences in background and our differences in approach. And so, I just say that for any life situation. I definitely feel that it applies on a global scale, and also within our own hearts. If we are battling different parts of ourselves, maybe the part of ourselves that wants to stay in and not go to work, and the part of ourselves that wants to be successful in life, to just realize that we're all of these parts of ourselves want the same thing. It wants us to be happy. So to really give ourselves the space to hear all of the different sides in whatever type of seemingly conflicting situation we might find ourselves in. So just wanted to share that bit of inspiration with you. Things are changing, things are shifting. It's really magical to see. And another highlight of the evening, I just have to sneak in there, Ricki Lake, the legendary Ricki Lake, who has single-handedly, I feel, created so much shift in the birth world by bringing the messages of proponents of natural birth and proponents of women's choice into the mainstream with her incredible documentary, The Business of Being Born. If you haven't seen that film, check it out. Give it to someone you know who is pregnant or might be wanting to be in the future. Thanks so much for joining me, you guys. I always look forward to your comments and feedback. See you next time in a new world.
Living in a new world.